Imagine this and really let the feeling settle in. The night is darkening outside your window. The stars are coming out just like they always do. But there's absolutely nothing inside you responding to that call for rest.
Hmm.
No weight behind your eyes, no familiar fog rolling into your mind, and, no biological unavoidable urge pulling you toward a bed. Midnight feels physiologically and mentally completely identical to noon.
That is an utterly chilling thought.
It's chilling, yeah, but it's also, well, it's monumentally liberating at first because the topic we are diving into today is truly earth-shattering. Sleep.
Right.
The single most dominant biological and societal force shaping human life has just vanished, gone. Not shortened, not optimized by some cool new tech, but just poof, eradicated from our biology. We are now a species of continuous consciousness.
It's the ultimate hypothetical, really.
Yeah.
And the sources we've looked at, I mean, everything from dense neurobiology papers to speculative fiction, they all force us to confront this one foundational question.
Which is?
What is the true, hidden, and maybe irreplaceable value of being unconscious for a third of your life? We have to look past the obvious, the simple benefit of rest, and ask what vital, unseen work sleep was actually doing.
Okay, so let's unpack this massive shift. Our mission for this deep dive is clear. We are going into a world where the human brain never powers down. We need to detail the immediate shockwaves, the profound cognitive costs, and the absolute restructuring that society would need to go through.
When every single person has 8 extra hours of awareness,
Yeah.
every
That's how you know.
single day.
Exactly.
We really have to guide you through the emotional arc here. We're going to start lively, enthusiastic, because the initial gains seem intoxicating, a dream world of infinite productivity.
But you need to stay with us.
Yes, because we have to shift pretty quickly into intense curiosity and then this growing unease as we peel back the layers and uncover the biological and social fractures that would just inevitably emerge.
Let's ground this in the immediate physical experience. The initial shock, as our sources describe it, it wouldn't be painful or dramatic. It would just be confusing.
Right. People would just go about their day expecting that familiar crash, the mental slump around hour 16 of being awake.
And it fails to arrive. You're
Yeah.
waiting for the exhaustion to hit, and instead you just feel this sustained, steady alertness.
That biological signal, that overwhelming need for sleep, would be the first thing to vanish completely. And think about the cultural upheaval just from that.
Oh, yeah.
Coffee, for instance. It would transition almost instantly from being a physiological necessity, a performance enhancer, to just being a flavor or, a social ritual.
The entire multi-billion-dollar caffeine industry would have to pivot overnight.
And what about furniture? We talk about disruption, but imagine the most central piece of furniture in basically every household, the bed. Our sources call them relics from a forgotten religion.
Yeah.
They're suddenly obsolete, these massive symbols of a biological constraint that just doesn't exist anymore.
The whole industry, mattress manufacturing, alarm clocks, it all just collapses.
And linguistically, I mean, the sheer number of times we say things like, I'm tired, or I'll sleep on it, or get a good night's rest,
All the time.
that would linger for maybe a week, just out of habit. But then, as that feeling of exhaustion just disappears from human experience, the language itself would vanish. The body, the sources suggest, would feel strangely weightless in time.
Weightless in time. I like that. There's no start or end point to your day anymore. Just this open, uninterrupted 24-hour canvas.
And this is where the celebration starts, the pure, intoxicating rush of it all. We have to look at the math.
Okay.
If you previously slept 8 hours a night, you have just reclaimed 56 hours a week.
That's more than 2 full days.
It's nearly 1/3 of your entire life just handed back to you as continuous liquid consciousness. This isn't just an extra day in the week. It's like a whole new dimension of time has opened up.
The acceleration must be immediate and just, breathtaking. A global society where every single person, from a factory worker to a quantum physicist, instantly has 33% more capacity.
We think of time as this finite resource, but suddenly it's liquid. It's available around the clock.
So give me some concrete examples of what that acceleration looks like, on a personal level.
On a personal level, hobbies just explode into serious secondary careers. People are learning 3 or 4 languages at the same time because they have 8 solid hours between midnight and 8 a.m. that they used to just dedicate to being unconscious.
So you could see someone starting an ambitious software project at 2 a.m., coding until sunrise, and then just transitioning straight into their normal day job without missing a beat.
Exactly. Life gets fundamentally rewritten before the sun even comes up. Academic achievement would accelerate wildly. Career progression, too.
The quantitative gains are incredible to think about. Productivity has to skyrocket globally, assuming people use this time well. And the very idea of burnout, that systemic physical and mental collapse from fatigue, it would seem entirely archaic.
Oh, absolutely. We look back at mandatory sleep as the single greatest bottleneck in our biological design, the most inefficient flaw.
But there's always a but.
Yes. Productivity would skyrocket, but this is the critical pivot point we need to emphasize. It would only skyrocket briefly, because very quickly, the brain would realize that while the body isn't feeling fatigue, the continuous process of just existing, of observing and retaining, that's taking an unrecognized toll.
So fatigue was just the warning light. It wasn't the actual problem.
Precisely. We have to understand that the true function of sleep was never just about resting muscles. It was a profound daily organizational boundary. It was a mandatory systemic reboot, a forced surrender of control.
And without it,
Without it, that complex high-energy machine, the human brain, never gets a chance to power down. And that continuous operation creates this immense biological pressure that we are just not equipped to handle.
Okay, so let's turn that corner and really unpack this growing unease. We've gained all this time, but the system is starting to wobble. The problem isn't the body anymore. It's this missing biological boundary and the instability it creates in our consciousness.
Correct. The human brain is a magnificent, energy-hungry organ, but it generates waste. Sleep was the daily erasure of consciousness that kept the mind from, well, literally drowning in its own metabolic byproduct.
And without that crucial daily cycle, the brain just can't sustain stability indefinitely.
It can't.
And we need to ground this in the biology for a second. When you say waste, you're not talking metaphorically, are you?
Not at all. We're talking about critical neurochemical regulation. For instance, the buildup of adenosine, a byproduct of just your neurons firing, is what currently creates that feeling of tiredness.
Right.
In this new world, we have to assume some evolutionary change, or maybe tech has solved the adenosine buildup so you start feeling tired. But the deeper problem, cellular waste removal, that's still there.
And that's where the glymphatic system comes into play, isn't it?
Absolutely. The glymphatic system is basically the brain's unique plumbing, its waste removal system. Unlike the rest of the body, the brain doesn't have traditional lymph vessels.
So what does it do?
Well, during deep sleep, brain cells, specifically glial cells, they actually shrink. This allows cerebrospinal fluid to rush through the tissue, flushing out all the accumulated toxins, most famously beta amyloid, which is implicated in neurodegenerative diseases.
So if the brain never enters that deep, necessary sleep state, the glymphatic system never fully engages. The brain literally starts to get clogged with its own garbage.
Exactly. The machine never powers down for cleaning. You avoid exhaustion, but you invite metabolic toxicity. And this is the foundation of what our sources call the memory saturation crisis. And it's far more terrifying than just feeling tired.
The memory saturation crisis, that implies the problem isn't forgetting things, but
Yeah.
remembering way too much.
Precisely. Right now, as we speak, sleep is your mind's silent, essential editor. It organizes your experiences. It strengthens the connections that are critical for survival, and it ruthlessly prunes the trivial stuff. It decides what matters enough to keep and what just fades away into noise.
So without that editor, everything stays. And can you paint a picture on what everything really means?
Imagine your commute to work today. Right now, you probably remember arriving. In a world without sleep, you'd remember the exact shade of the license plate on the car in front of you 2 blocks before your exit.
Oh, wow.
You'd remember every snippet of conversation you overheard, every slight change in the background music at the grocery store, every half-formed transient thought you had while just staring out the window. The mind doesn't just get full. It becomes a perpetual noisy backlog.
Where every trivial piece of sensory data is retained with the same clarity as, like, a major life event.
Exactly. And that retention must create a massive, continuous cognitive drag. You'd spend a huge portion of your waking hours just trying to navigate your own mental archives.
That processing load is immense. And this crowding, it must directly impact emotional processing. That seems like the most dangerous part.
It is. We rely on the fading of memories for emotional recovery. If you can't forget, you can't truly heal.
You wouldn't forget arguments with your partner, or that one embarrassing moment from high school. That mental scar is just constantly refreshed.
Emotional wounds would linger with this unnatural clarity. Our sources suggest that the capacity for emotional resilience, the ability to just let go of resentment or shame, It becomes drastically harder.
Because the memories never soften.
If forgiveness and emotional maturity require the natural dulling of those sharp edges over time and memories being continuously reinforced, that process just, it slows down or it
Yeah.
stops entirely. You are perpetually living in the memory of every negative, stressful, or emotionally charged interaction you've ever had.
That is a staggering cognitive burden. We rely on forgetting for our own peace. We literally need the mercy of oblivion.
We do.
If the negative experiences are always present, the weight would just become unbearable for so many people.
And this leads directly into the degradation of focus. When you don't have that daily organizational reset, the brain's ability to prioritize what needs immediate attention just erodes. When you remember everything, how do you decide what actually mattered?
Everything carries equal weight in the archive.
Exactly. So it sounds like a severe, continuous attention deficit. Your attention just fractures into something thin and brittle.
You can technically stay awake forever, but your capacity for deep, singular, sustained focus, the kind you need for complex science or art, it just degrades.
It becomes thinner and more brittle. That's the phrase one source used.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. The human brain is incredibly plastic. It's adaptable. Wouldn't evolution or maybe some immediate tech solve this saturation crisis? Wouldn't we develop, I don't know, conscious cognitive filters or AI assistants to manage all that noise?
That is the great hope. And the answer is complex. Yes, the brain is adaptable. It might try to develop faster processing pathways.
Yeah.
And yes, technology would absolutely rush in to provide those filters. We'd have neural interfaces designed specifically to suppress non-critical memories.
Okay, so there's a solution.
But here's the biological constraint. Filtering is active work. It requires continuous energy and attention. Sleep was powerful because it was a passive, involuntary process. You didn't have to choose to forget. Forgetting chose you.
So the filtering process itself adds to the saturation load. You're trading passive biological cleansing for active cognitive management.
You've got it. And critically, long-term thinking suffers immensely. The decisions we make become more impulsive. It's not about being exhausted. It's because the mental architecture designed to consolidate wisdom, to put current events into context against a carefully pruned history, is missing.
You lose the forest for the trees.
You lose the ability to see the deep underlying patterns because you are perpetually overwhelmed by every single minute detail, every leaf in that forest.
And that cognitive fracturing immediately leads to a complete breakdown of our current societal structures, and it starts with the most fundamental one, time itself.
Right.
Sleep, right now, is the great natural clock. It slices life into these distinct, manageable days. We organize everything, work, calendars, relationships, around that 24-hour cycle.
And without that forced biological slice, time undergoes this radical perceptual shift. It blurs into what our sources call an endless ribbon of moments.
An endless ribbon of moments.
Weeks lose all texture. A Tuesday evening feels no different from a Sunday morning. The very concept of tomorrow starts to weaken when consciousness never actually stops. It's just continuous, unending now.
That level of temporal distortion must be profoundly disorienting. I mean, if you can't look forward to tomorrow because tomorrow is just the next second of now, how do you stay motivated? How do you plan anything big?
The psychological cost is huge. One of the first casualties is the ritualistic relief of the weekend. That distinction between labor time and leisure time just collapses. So what's the first psychological remedy people reach for?
They would have to invent substitutes, artificial structures to get that sense of a pause back.
Absolutely. The sources predict this rush to create artificial breaks that simulate the relief sleep once provided. And these wouldn't be for physical rest, but for psychological compartmentalization.
So what do they look like?
Dark rooms, sound-dampened withdrawal capsules, scheduled periods of total sensory deprivation.
So they're not bedrooms, they're forced isolation chambers.
They're retreat chambers, a forced non-biological pause in the continuous onslaught of input. People would schedule mandatory 6-hour sessions of zero sensory input, purely to let their minds catch up, manage the saturation, and compartmentalize the last rotation of work.
It's like a secular, technological form of monastic withdrawal.
That's a great way to put it. And while individuals are trying to manage their internal clock, the external world never shuts up. The night is over. The very concept of silence fundamentally changes.
That's the external shock wave. Cities just hum continuously. Construction wouldn't pause at 10 p.m. because the workers don't need to sleep.
Factories run 24/7. Retail markets, global exchanges, even your local services would never close. The concept of business hours just collapses entirely.
That means every single industry shifts from a model based on fatigue mitigation, the standard three-shift, 8-hour day, to something based on rotational consciousness. How would that actually work?
Well, it would evolve pretty quickly. Since the brain's cognitive efficiency starts to degrade after a sustained period of high focus, even without fatigue, organizations would realize the maximum productivity window is probably shorter than 8 hours.
So, like 6-hour shifts?
The system might shift to, say, 4 6-hour productive shifts per day, and each worker would be mandated to take at least 3 or 4 hours of cognitive withdrawal in their retreat chamber between those shifts.
So, a worker might go from 6 a.m. to noon, take a withdrawal period, and then be back at it from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., while the infrastructure needs just never dip. That sounds like a massive energy drain.
Infrastructure is under constant strain. Power grids that were designed around a massive, reliable nighttime dip in demand suddenly have this constant high load. Transportation, subways, airlines, freight, it all transitions from having start and stop schedules to this continuous, complex flow management.
There's no downtime for maintenance.
It has to be done dynamically, mid-flow.
And this continuous pressure, it has to create a new economic divide.
Absolutely. The economy expands exponentially because of the 33% gain in productive time, but the inequality sharpens. The new stratification isn't just based on capital, but on cognitive resilience to continuity.
Meaning?
Those who can adapt the fastest to the nonstop information flow, who can manage the constant saturation and thrive in perpetual activity, they dominate the highest levels of business and innovation.
And those who struggle with that inherent stress of nonstop awareness, the pressure of infinite data, the absence of a break, they just quietly fall behind. They become cognitively vulnerable in a 2047 world.
It's a whole new form of inequality rooted in processing speed and the cost of self-management. And this psychological pressure just seeps into social and domestic life, which is structured entirely around shared pauses.
Right. If the traditional day-night cycle vanishes, temporal tribes must emerge.
Yes. You'd have your artificial day people who try to keep schedules loosely aligned with the sun just for familiarity, and then the former night people who find creative freedom in running shifts completely opposite the historical norm.
And families and social groups just fragment along these new lines.
And the strain on relationships would be immense. Not from absence, which is a common stressor now, travel, long hours, but from too much presence.
That is the most insidious social consequence. When no one ever physically disappears into sleep, there's no shared break from interaction or friction or scrutiny.
Absence lets perspective form. It allows things to cool down. It provides a necessary reset button. Without that reset, minor irritations just fester.
Continuous awareness of your partner, your children, your housemates for 24 hours a day, day after day. The friction would become overwhelming.
So solitude, the ability to be truly alone with your thoughts, becomes the ultimate scarce resource.
Exactly. Privacy becomes the new luxury in a world without sleep. If you want true alone time, you have to actively schedule it, enforce it, often by physically withdrawing into those expensive, specialized retreat chambers.
It becomes a resource scarcer than time itself, because time is abundant, but the psychological space you need for self-management is not.
Okay, now let's pull back to the wider ecological and cultural frame. We've established the human shockwaves, but how does the rest of the natural world negotiate this new reality of a permanently active, light-polluting, and continuously productive human species?
Biology negotiates on a much slower timescale, obviously, but the impact is immediate and profound, and it's driven by a fundamental disruption of light cycles. The blurring of nocturnal and diurnal boundaries begins in every ecosystem touched by humanity.
Because artificial light just spreads further and stays on permanently, altering global photoperiods.
Which means species that rely on that established rhythm day sleepers, nocturnal hunters, plants that need specific dark periods to reproduce, they are immediately vulnerable.
Extremely vulnerable. Ecosystems would rebalance violently. I mean, think about insects. Moths, which use the moon for navigation, become disoriented and exhausted by constant, pervasive streetlights.
Their populations would crash, which in turn affects the insectivores that feed on them. Plants that rely on specific darkness cues to flower or set seed, they struggle or fail entirely.
The natural world relies on periods of quiet and darkness just as much as we relied on sleep.
It does. Among animal life, the species that thrive on constant activity survive, while the highly specialized rhythm-dependent species just vanish.
Oh.
Critically, predators that rely on the cloak of darkness owls, specialized wildcats, They would struggle immensely.
Because the environment is always lit up and always active with humans, which is a huge deterrent.
Right, but the opportunists, the generalists, they must thrive.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, they would dominate. Scavengers, rats, urban coyotes, many bird species who thrive on constant access to resources and human waste, their populations would explode. Ecosystems quietly but fundamentally rebalance around a hyperdominant species humanity that never goes still.
Essentially eliminating the concept of a nighttime habitat.
Now let's talk evolution over the long term. If we assume humanity stabilizes in this state of continuous consciousness thousands of years from now, what is the final biological response?
The response would be decisive. Our sources suggest that brains might actually become slightly smaller over millennia.
Smaller. That's counterintuitive.
It is, but it's necessary. If you don't need a dedicated, energy-intensive phase like sleep and all the complex neurochemical hardware required for nocturnal memory consolidation, the brain can be optimized for sheer, continuous, low-power efficiency. It's a shift from bulk processing power to lean, always-on architecture.
And the emotional landscape. If consciousness is continuous, the energy required for extreme passion or joy or rage, it must be immense and unsustainable.
That's the prediction. Emotional intensity could significantly dampen across the species. If you live every moment with that unnatural clarity we talked about, emotional extremes become too metabolically and psychologically expensive. Evolution would favor individuals who are consistently measured, calm, and able to filter continuous input without being overwhelmed.
So continuous awareness pushes culture and biology toward emotional steadiness over passionate volatility. Art would change, favoring prolonged, incremental creation over sudden, explosive bursts of genius.
And that links directly to the death of dreams, which might be the most profound cultural loss of all.
Dreams. The strange internal theater where our fears and symbols and creativity rehearse themselves. What happens when that theater closes down for good?
Dreams just disappear. That illogical, symbolic landscape generated by the sleeping mind is gone. And that internal space is where the subconscious processes anxieties and generates abstract meaning. Without it, our connection to the deep shared language of symbols and archetypes it weakens drastically.
If that internal language of symbols dries up, mythology must immediately suffer.
Mythology certainly dries up, and key artistic movements struggle to even exist. I mean, think about surrealism, an entire movement based on the juxtaposition of dreamlike, illogical imagery with waking reality.
If there is no dreamlike logic, surrealism just becomes an academic curiosity.
Exactly. Stories become more literal, more engineered. They're stripped of the pervasive, unsettling mystery that comes from the illogical workings of the sleeping mind.
So the human imagination, deprived of that nightly, unmanaged burst of surreal creation, tilts decisively toward precision, engineering, and data analysis. It moves away from mystery.
We shift from the poet to the engineer, a species defined by continuous, literal observation. And this connects directly to the resulting spiritual and philosophical erosion. Sleep was, after all, a daily act of humility.
A daily brush with unconsciousness, a reminder that we are not perpetually in control.
Exactly. Every 24 hours, you are forced to surrender your control and your consciousness. It was a constant, quiet reminder of mortality. Without it, the sources suggest humans would feel subtly immortal in their awareness.
Because your personal stream of self has never been broken?
Your personal existence has never lapsed. So death becomes this external offense, this abrupt, unbelievable termination of continuity.
The fear of death would intensify dramatically.
The perpetual conscious mind finds termination abhorrent and illogical. This loss of enforced humility would drive the creation of new rituals. Rituals designed specifically to replace the sense of surrender and finitude that sleep once provided. Society would need new mechanisms, maybe highly uncomfortable ones, to enforce a collective sense of humility.
So the mental environment of this new world isn't one of collapse, but one of systemic stress and continuous overload? The analysis suggests that mental health doesn't fall apart, but the nature of the illness just changes entirely.
Correct. We just exchange one set of problems for another. Anxiety rooted in physical exhaustion and emotional fatigue, our modern epidemic, is replaced by anxiety rooted in saturation.
Saturation.
Too much continuity, too many thoughts, too much memory, and just a relentless, unending stream of input.
So the disease of this new era is continuous data overload, not physical tiredness. The mind fundamentally craves interruption and the end of data flow the way it once craved physical rest.
And this leads to the ultimate paradox, which is maybe the most defining feature of this new economy. In a world that's drowning in available time, The single most valuable and scarce resource is not time, but absence.
Absence. That's an analytical inversion of everything we value now. We're no longer chasing the quantity of time. We're aggressively managing the quality of our presence. How would the wealthiest people actually enforce this absence?
It becomes an economy built entirely on disconnection. New disciplines emerge. Cognitive fasting, scheduled periods of mandatory active non-thinking, or focusing only on simple repetitive tasks to clear the mental buffer.
What else?
Enforced boredom. Highly valued services that just eliminate all external stimuli. And, of course, scheduled oblivion through advanced technology sold at a premium.
So entire industries would spring up just to sell people the feeling of not being awake for a while, even if they technically are. They're selling control over the information stream, selling managed disconnection.
Think of the cost of a private, soundproof, light-proof, zero-signal retreat chamber.
It would be astronomical. The people who maintain continuous connection dominate the economy, but they pay the highest price psychologically, making the ability to occasionally disconnect the ultimate status symbol.
Exactly.
So centuries later, humanity can't sustain that initial frantic, accelerated pace. A new, strange equilibrium has to form to make life manageable. What does this stabilized civilization look like?
It settles into rigid, complex social and work cycles based on attention and withdrawal, not on night and day. The structure of the city adapts significantly. Bedrooms are gone, replaced by architecturally specialized retreat chambers that often line the core of major buildings, designed for maximum sensory deprivation.
We'd need new language, too. The concept of rest is defunct, so we'd need new, precise words to describe these managed states of non-input.
Absolutely. Language would evolve new terms for states that approximate mental renewal without actual unconsciousness. Maybe terms like sync out, withdrawal state, or cognitive vacuum.
And raising children would be completely revolutionized.
Utterly. They wouldn't be taught how to fall asleep. They would be taught fundamental new survival skills. How to safely navigate the continuous stream of awareness, how to self-enforce disconnection, and how to manage deep memory saturation from a very young age.
Okay, so here we are at the end of this journey, the final paradox of this world. Let's look at the ledger one last time. Humanity survives. It thrives by many quantitative metrics. Longer productive lives, faster innovation, near zero fatigue accidents. This is a highly efficient species, permanently online.
By every measurable metric of innovation and economic power, they win. They dominate their planet, maybe their sector of the galaxy, at an accelerated pace. But the sources are clear. Something fundamental and irreplaceable is gone. That silent daily erasure was the engine of biological and emotional renewal.
We gained infinite awareness and continuity, but we paid for it by losing rhythm, humility, and the psychological depth that comes only from relinquishing control.
Indeed. Sleep was the great equalizer. It humbled everyone. Kings and beggars were equally forced into surrender every night. It was a biological mandate that consciousness is borrowed, a temporary state, not something inherently owned.
And without it,
you gain infinite continuity, but you lose the profound regenerative power that only surrender can provide.
a world without sleep would not be a conventional nightmare, but something far more chilling. It would be a quieter, stranger reality, and ultimately far more revealing about the complex mechanisms that actually sustain our humanity. A civilization that never closes its eyes would finally definitively understand why it once needed to.
That is the ultimate, inescapable takeaway from this deep dive.
A profound thought experiment for you to sit with today. We've been through the deep dive. We'll catch you next time.